Good day, everyone. So now we will discuss the leaf and bud as well as the flower. So this is my topic po for today's video. So yeah. So let me move my slide. So these are our contents. So now first, let's discuss the leaf and the bud. So leaves commonly develop into a flattened surface or leaf blade to present a large area for efficient absorption of light. Remember that the principal function of leaves is to absorb sunlight for manufacture of plant sugars through the process called the photosynthesis. So, when we are talking about leaf, so this is the singular of leaves. So, this is any usually flattened green outgrowth from the stem of a vascular plant. So, this is also the primary site of photosynthesis. Kaya nga kung babalikan natin, di ba? So that the primary or principal function of leaves is to absorb sunlight for manufacturing of plant sugars. So the functions of leaves are to make food through photosynthesis and the site of gas exchange, and lastly, it stores food. So they form at the beginning of the growing season once the leaves have fallen off the branches. So bud scales from the preparation of for both new leaves and the extension of the stems group. So the plant also has flowers that contains the sexual organs for the plants, and it also attracts insects for pollination, which in result produces fruit which protects, nourishes, and carries the flower and its function. So here I have a simple activity which is to label the parts of simple leaf. Yan. So label the parts of a simple leaf and we write the answers here. So we can use our spare paper and ball pen to answer this one. So remember that the answers are here already in the word box. Okay, and then let's know the correct answers. So, as you can see here, this is the parts of a leaf. So, we have a leaf base, an axial, a stem, a petiole, venules, the vein, and it is in the leaf blade. And we also have leaf tip, margin, and the midrib. So, in understanding the leaves, the bud, and flower, we must know their parts and discuss their function. So, there. So, looking back at our leaf, so the blade of a leaf is the expanded thin structure on either side of the midrib. So, the leaf is supported away from the stem by stem-like structure called the petiole. So, petiole serves as the a stem-like structure. It will serve as the support from to the stem. So it varies in length or may be lacking entirely, and the base of the petiole is attached to the stem at the node. So the smaller angle formed between the petiole and the stem is called the leaf axial. The leaf axial. And an active or dormant bud or cluster of buds is usually located in the axial and is referred to as the axillary buds. And the leaf blade, it is composed of several layers. So let's move on the next slide. So it is composed of several layers. On the top and bottom is the layer of thickened tough cells called the epidermis. So the primary function of the epidermis is protection of leaf tissue, and the way in which the cells in the epidermis are arranged determines the texture of the leaf surface. So some leaves have hairs and are an extension of certain cells of the epidermis. And so the African violet has so many that the leaf feels like a velvet, and part of the epidermis is the cuticle that produces a waxy layer. So as you can see there at the top, there is a cuticle. So the cuticle is a waxy layer has a waxy layer called cutin that protects the leaf from dehydration and prevents penetration of some diseases. And the amount of cutin is a direct response to sunlight, increasing with increasing light intensity. For the reason, so plants grown in the shade should be moved into the full sunlight gradually. So, kasi our plant is slightly adapting. No? If it is already there in a shady environment for a very long time, and then we are going to put it in a sunlight, no, in a direct sunlight, so what happened is that if the adaptation is still not complete, so magkakaroon po tayo ng dehydration. That is why it is better for us if we want to move our plants, no, from shady environment to a light environment. So kailangan i-move natin sila in a gradual way. So, over a period of few weeks to allow the cutin layer to build and to protect the leaves from the shock of rapid loss or sun scald. So, the waxy cutin also repels water and can shed pesticides if spreader stickers, agents, or soaps are not used. So, this is the reason that many pesticides manufacturers include some sort of spray additive to adhere or to penetrate the cutin layer. On the other side of leaves, some epidermal cells are capable of opening and closing. So, these cells regulate the passage of water, oxygen, carbon dioxide through the leaf. Yung tinatawag natin na regulatory cells are the stomata. Okay? These are called as guard cells. Okay? So, they protect the openings in the leaf called the stomata. And if it is singular, that's stoma. Yeah. So, the opening and closing of the cells are determined by the weather. Conditions that would cause larger water losses from the plants. Example, if it is high temperature or low humidity, it will stimulate gourd cells to close. And if we have mild weather conditions, leave gourd cells in an open condition. So, gourd cells will close in the absence of light. And it will close in the absence of light. And the middle layer of the leaf is called the mesophyll. So, that's the mesophyll. So, and it is located between the upper and the lower epidermis. So, this is the layer in which photosynthesis occurs. And the mesophyll is divided into dense upper layer called the palisade layer. And the lower layer of cells that contain lots of air is called the spongy parenchyma layer. So, the cells in these two layers contains chloroplasts, which are the actual site of photosynthetic processes. So, I already discussed to you the cuticle that produces a waxy substance called the cutin. So, this is the waterproof layer that keeps water in the plants. And then the stomata, these are the openings in the epidermis, mainly located on the underside of leaves. So, this works in the process of gas exchange. Then we have gourd cells. So, these gourd cells opens and closes the stomata. And then, at the middle side, we have mesophyll layer. So, we have palisade layer at the top and the spongy parenchyma at the bottom. Okay, so palisade mesophyll is the primary site of photosynthesis, while spongy mesophyll contains air and chloroplast, and this is the site of photosynthesis and gas exchange. Okay, next. For greater purpose, plants modify their leaves. Plants modify their leaves. But before that, so we must know that there are also tissues of the leaf. So we have these vascular bundles. So these are also called as veins. And in spongy mesophyll, phloem moves food from leaf to the rest of the plant. And xylem moves water and minerals up to the leaves from the roots. So, and for the external parts of the leaf, we had petiole. Petiole is the leaf stalk or part that connects the leaf to the stem, while the blade is the large flat part of the leaf. And lastly, the midrib. As you can see here, the big, or what do you call this? The large center vein. So that's what we call the midrib. Okay. So there. So there are modifications on leaves. So they modified for special functions, for example, climbing and substrate attachment, storage, protection against predation or climatic conditions, or trapping and digesting insect prey. So I have here 7 modifications, but actually there are so many pa. But let's talk about these modifications that are here on the screen. So we have tendrils. First, tendrils, these are the leaves that are modified into slender, wiry, and coiled structures called the leaf tendrils and support climbers to climb. So like for example is the Pisum sativum. Okay? So we have here a photo wherein we can refer the meaning, no, that are there, no. So tendrils. And then the spines. So spines wherein the leaves modified into pointed structures and usually protect them from herbivores. So example is the opuntia or even the cactuses. Next po is the phylode. Now, phylode, as you can see here, so I'll zoom it, this one, phylode. It is a green extended structure formed by the modification of petiole or rachis of leaf that carries out photosynthesis. And wherein here, the petiole is modified. So like for example, here is, is acacia. Next po is the storage leaves. So wherein leaves become fleshy due to storage of water and food material. Like for example is the aloe. Yan, the aloe vera. Next is the cotyledons. Cotyledons wherein the mature embryo shows either 2 or 1 cotyledon. So like for example, angiosperms or gymnosperms. Next, the leaf bladders. Leaf bladders. So some of the leaves of aquatic plants modified into leaf bladders to trap small insects. So like for example is Utricularia. And then next is the leaf pitcher. And the leaf pitcher. So the lamina of the whole leaf is modified into a lid known as the pitcher. So which traps insects to fulfill the need of nitrogen. Like for example is the Nepenthes. So there are clues that lead to plant identification that includes the anatomy of the stem, buds, flowers, fruits, and several characteristics of leaves. So it includes the shape of the leaf blade, the leaf arrangement along the stem, and the pattern of the veins. So venation, it refers to the patterns in which the veins are distributed in the blade. So parallel vein, and the netted vein are the 2 types of venation. So parallel vein are numerous veins which run essentially parallel to each other and are connected laterally by minute straight veinlets. When we say net veined, so these are leaves that have veins that branch from the main rib or ribs and then subdivide in finer veinlets and then unite in a complicated network. There. So these are the simple other types of venation. We have arcuate, cross-venulate, dichotomous, longitudinal, palmate, parallel, pinnate, reticulate, and rotate. So simple leaves are those in which the leaf blade is single continuous unit, and a compound leaf is composed of several separate leaflets arising from the same petiole. So we also have this shape. So simple leaves have shape. So there are basic leaf shapes. So we have sword shape, lance shape, ovate, elliptic, round, concordate, oblanceolate, spatulate, rhomboid, lobe, spear shape, pinnatisect, pinnate, bipinnate, tripinnate, trifoliate, palmate, and digitate. So, and then we also have leaf arrangement. So, we can see here the type of phyllotaxis. So, we have spiral. In letter A, that's spiral. In letter B and C, that's opposite. No? Opposite. So, and then letter D, that's whorled. Okay, whorled. So, leaf and flower bud. So, a bud is an undeveloped shoot from from which embryonic leaves, flowers, parts, or both arise. So, leaf buds are often less plump and more pointed than the flower buds. So, we have terminal buds and lateral buds. Terminal buds are those which are located at the apex of the stem, while lateral buds are borne on the sides of the stem. So, most lateral buds arise in the axis of the leaf and are called axillary buds. And we also have adventitious buds. Those are which arise at sites other than the terminal or the axillary position. So, that is why they are called as adventitious. So, what is the function of bud? So, bud scales act as protection for newly formed leaves and branch growth. So, they form at the end of the growing season once the leaves have fallen off the branches. So, bud scales form in preparation for both new leaves and the extension of stems growth. So, in perennial plants, that fall is usually associated with approaching winter dormancy. So, that is why we sometimes see that there are different colors of leaves other than green. So, in many trees, leaf senescence is brought about by declining day length and falling temperature toward the end of the growing season. So the chlorophyll production in deciduous plants slows as the days get shorter and cooler. And eventually, the pigment is broken down completely. So this happens during the autumn season. Okay? And yellow and orange pigments called carotenoids become more conspicuous. And in some species, anthocyanin pigments accumulate. So I have here the learning check. So you have to list 3 major parts of the leaf. Next, second is, give the 3 characteristics of leaf that help in plant identification. Okay, now let's talk about flowers. Flowers are important in plant reproduction. So it contains the sexual organs for plants. It produces fruit, which protects, nourishes, and carries the seeds. Also, we see that flowers attracts insects for pollination. So there are commonly 4 distinct whorls of the flower. So we have an outer calyx consisting of sepals. We have the corolla consisting of petals. And we have androecium or group of stamens. And in the center, we have gynoecium consisting of pistil. Androecium is for male part and gynoecium is for female part. So the parts of flower have their own function. So these are the following. So first, let's talk about sepals. So sepals are the outer covering of the flower bud. So it protects the stamen and the pistils when flower is in bud stage. Next, collectively known as calyx. So sepals are collectively known as calyx. Next, we have petals. Okay? So petals are brightly colored. It protects the stamen and the pistils and it attracts pollinating insects, collectively known as the corolla. So as you can see here, we are sometimes like confused of what's the difference between petal and sepal. So remember that petal is actually for pollination. It attracts pollinators, no? While here in sepals actually protect the flower or protect the stamens and pistil during the bud stage. But during the mature stage of the plant, so petals are there. So next is, I'm sorry sa aking background noise. Next po is the male reproductive part. So we have anther and we have a filament. So anther produces pollen. So as you can see here, the yellow one, that's the pollen, no? So that's the pollen. So while the filament, this supports the anther. It supports the anther. So next, we have in a reproductive part, we have two. We have ovary and we have stigma. So ovary at the bottom. So this is the enlarged portion of at base of pistil, and it produces ovules which develops into seeds. And then next is the stigma. Stigma holds the pollen grains. Okay, stigma holds the pollen grains. So if the pollinators attaches to the stigma, so the stigma holds the pollen grains that is traveled afterwards through the ovary. Next is the style. So style connects the stigma with the ovary, and it supports the stigma so that it can be pollinated. So a flower that lacks stamens is called as pistillate. Pistillate. So, or female. So, while one with the lack of pistil is called to be staminate, or these are male. So, when the same plant bears unisexual flowers of both sexes, it is said to be monoecious. Like for example, the tuberose, the begonia, oak, the corn, and the hazels. So, when the male and the female flowers are on the different plants, the plant is dioecious. Okay, dioecious. Like for example, the date, the holly, the cottonwood, the willow. So those are the examples of dioecious plants. So when there are male, female, and bisexual flowers on the same plant, the plant is termed as polygamous. So here, the flower having sepals, petals, stamens, and pistils. So as you can see, these are the parts of flower. Then they are called as complete. Okay, they are called as complete. So, if there are sepals, petals, stamens, and the pistils. Okay. So, reproduction in flowering plants begin with pollination. Okay, it begins with pollination. So, the transfer of pollen from anther to stigma on the same flower or to the stigma of another flower on the same plant is called self-pollination. So, or from the anther on one plant to the stigma of another plant, that is what we call the cross-pollination. So, here, I have here a structure of how flowering plants reproduce. So once the pollen grain lodges on the stigma, a pollen tube grows from the pollen grain to an ovule. And the two sperm nuclei then pass through the pollen tube. Okay? And one of them unites with the egg nucleus and produces a zygote. And the other sperm nucleus unites with two polar nuclei to produce endosperm nucleus. So the following fertilization, the embryo is on its way becoming a seed, and it is at this time the ovary itself enlarges from the fruit. So looking back, so what are the importance of flowers? So it is important in florists and nursery businesses. Many plants are grown solely for their flowers, and plants have flowers to attract insects for pollination. But people grow them for beauty and economic value. So it is said that all flowers have a uniform function, the reproduction of the species through the production of the seeds. Okay, so for our learning check, so true or false? All flowers have uniform function, the reproduction of the species through the production of seed. Second, name the 4 distinct roles of flower parts. Okay, so that's our lesson for today, and these are the references. You can check the references for further readings. Thank you so much, and this is the end of my report about leaf, flower, and bud. Thank you so much, Sir Dennis. Thank you for your for the knowledge that you have shared to us. Thank you so much. I hope that you are still safe, and I wish that someday maging teacher pa po kita ulit. Thank you so much po!